For 15 years, I was the perfect wife. But one morning, everything changed. A lipstick stain, blood red, bold, unapologetic, mocked me from my husband's dress shirt. But as I peeled back the layers, I found something far worse than a simple affair. I'm Elena Foster, once a high school English teacher, but over the years became the perfect homemaker, fundraiser, and supportive wife. On a Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m., it all crumbled in my hands like dust. I was standing in our walk-in closet, sorting through Mark's clothes for dry cleaning, when my fingers brushed against a crumpled white dress shirt, tucked carelessly, behind his neatly arranged row of Italian leather shoes. My first thought was purely practical. Why hadn't he put it in the hamper? Mark was always meticulous. But as I unfolded the fabric, my heart stopped. There it was, a single smear of lipstick. Blood red, brazen, mocking. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. 1,000 thoughts fought for dominance in my mind, but only one clawed its way to the surface. That shade wasn't mine. I gripped the shirt tighter, knuckles white, as the air in the room thickened around me. My world had just shifted on its axis, and I wasn't sure if I was standing or falling. I tried to convince myself. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it was nothing, but I already knew better. Mark had worn this shirt last night. He had kissed me on the cheek before leaving for an emergency surgery at Riverside Medical Center. I had believed him. Of course I had. Because I was his wife. Because I trusted him. Because I was a fool. The closet seemed to shrink around me as the realization settled into my bones. He was lying. And if he had lied about this, what else had he lied about? I should have screamed. I should have collapsed in a heap on the floor, sobbing. But I didn't. Instead, a quiet, eerie calm took over my body as I folded the shirt neatly, as if I were handling something fragile, something already dead. But I needed proof. That afternoon, I waited. I went through the motions, helping the twins with their homework, listening to Emma practice piano, preparing dinner, playing the part of the devoted wife, while my soul splintered into 1,000 jagged pieces. And then, the opportunity arrived. Mark had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. He never left his phone unattended. Never. But tonight he did. It took everything in me to steady my shaking hands as I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the screen. One quick glance. That was all I needed. I just had to confirm what my gut already knew, and then it lit up. Sophia Haynes. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. When are you leaving her? The words sliced through me like a blade. I felt the blood drain from my face, my stomach twist into a tight, unbearable knot. Sophia Haynes. A junior surgeon at the hospital. Young, ambitious, perfectly positioned to ruin my life. I opened their message thread, and what I found made me physically ill. Hundreds of texts, photos, plans made while I was tucking our children into bed. Jokes at my expense. Poor thing still thinks there's something to celebrate. She's planning a big anniversary surprise. Maybe I should just tell her and put her out of her misery. Let her play house a little longer. The walls of my home, the home I had built for my family, seemed to close in on me. How long had I been living in this lie? I placed the phone back exactly as I found it. Then, I made his coffee, kissed him goodbye as he left for work, and went upstairs to vomit until there was nothing left inside me but fury. That night, once the children were asleep, I waited in our bedroom, the room where we had made love, where we had whispered promises, where I had spent years believing I was loved. When Mark walked in, he barely looked at me as he removed his watch, placing it methodically on the nightstand. Just like always. Are you sleeping with Sophia Haynes? My voice was too steady. Too cold. He didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. Yes. The world tilted. but I didn't let it show. How long? A smirk. A goddamn smirk. Does it matter? He wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. This wasn't a confession. It was an execution. I want a divorce, Elena. The words should have shattered me. Instead, they ignited something else. Why? My voice was barely above a whisper. Mark sighed, as if this conversation was an inconvenience. As if I were an inconvenience. I've outgrown this life. I've outgrown us. He gestured vaguely to our bedroom, the place where our children had been conceived, where we had mourned losses, where I had held him through every triumph and every failure. I've given 15 years to this marriage, to these children. I'm 45. If I'm going to start over, it has to be now. Start over. Start over? I had given up my career for him, my youth, my dreams. I had been the one holding everything. Together while he worked late nights and took weekend golf trips and climbed his way to chief surgeon. And now he was discarding me like a used napkin. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not the brilliant doctor, not the devoted husband, not the man I had loved. I saw a liar, a fraud, a stranger. He walked over to the nightstand, pulled a business card from his wallet, and placed it on the counter. My lawyer will be in touch. You'll be taken care of financially. The children will adjust. They always do. Then he turned and walked out of our bedroom, out of our marriage. As I stood there staring at the card, something inside me hardened. Mark Foster thought he had won. He thought he had executed me with his cruelty, left me broken and defeated. But he had no idea. This wasn't my end. This was just the beginning. I had spent 15 years managing our household's finances, carefully tracking every bill, every investment, every tuition payment. I thought I knew where every dollar went. I was wrong. Sitting in my home office, the space where I once planned, family vacations and coordinated Mark's endless charity galas, I stared at the bank statements spread out before me. Rows of numbers, once meaningless, now screamed betrayal. You're sure you never heard of Horizon Holdings? Veronica Marsh's voice was crisp, calculated. She was one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. Sharp as a scalpel, and just as lethal. I shook my head, my fingers tightening around the paper. No, that's not one of our investments. And yet, over the past 2 years, Mark had funneled nearly $250,000 to it in neat, deliberate withdrawals. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. The numbers added up to a silent fortune siphoned from our joint savings. Classic asset diversion, Veronica mused. But there's something off about the amounts. Too sporadic for an offshore nest egg. This looks more like... She paused, tapping her red fingernails against her desk. Like hush money, I finished for her. Her sharp blue eyes met mine. Exactly. I forced myself to breathe, forcing down the nausea that clawed up my throat. The affair was one thing. This was something else. Mark wasn't just leaving me. He was hiding something, and I intended to find out what. Do you remember a Dr. Daniel Brooks? Veronica asked, as she scanned another file. The name tugged at something deep in my memory. I vaguely remembered a quiet, serious man, one of Mark's colleagues at Riverside Medical Center. Then one day he was just gone. Mark said he left because of professional differences. Veronica smirked. He didn't just leave. He vanished. And you're not the only one asking questions about that fertility clinic Mark helped expand. The air in the room thickened. The fertility clinic. I felt my stomach drop. We had struggled for years to conceive naturally. 3 painful, heart-wrenching rounds of IVF before I carried the twins. Another 2 before I finally had Emma, and Mark had been there through it all. Hadn't he? Veronica handed me a sticky note with a phone number. Brooks runs a small private practice now, About an hour outside the city. If anyone knows what Mark was up to, it's him. Dr. Brooks agreed to meet me the next afternoon. His office was a stark contrast to the sleek, modern halls of Riverside Medical. It was small, almost humble, tucked between a hardware store and a diner that smelled of burnt coffee. He looked older, wearier, as if he had been carrying a burden for far too long. When he saw me, he sighed. "I always knew this day would come," he said quietly. I clenched my hands to keep them from shaking. "Then tell me what my husband did." For the next hour, he did. The fertility clinic at Riverside had been a gold mine, its success rate nearly miraculous. But Brooks had noticed inconsistencies, slight differences in lab reports, procedure records that didn't align. At first, he thought it was human error. Then he found proof. Mark and Dr. Mercer were falsifying records. Patients believed they were receiving one treatment when, in reality, their cases were being altered. Altered how? My voice barely registered, above a whisper. Brooks hesitated, then slid a file folder across the table. "Elena, your children." His voice cracked. "Mark made sure his sperm was never used during your IVF treatments." The room spun. What? The word came out strangled, barely audible. He switched the samples. He ensured the clinic used anonymous donors instead. I couldn't breathe. My hands curled into fists as I struggled to process what I had just heard. No, that was impossible. Mark wanted children. He had been there. He had supported me through every loss, every devastating failure, every hopeful attempt. Hadn't he? He did this because of his family's heart condition, Brooks continued, his voice laced with regret. It's genetic. 50% chance of being passed on. He didn't want to risk his children inheriting it. So he made sure they weren't his at all. The world fractured around me. 15 years. 15 years I had loved him, built a family, with him, sacrificed for him. And all of it, every kiss, every whispered promise, every night spent awake dreaming of the children we would have, was a lie. Mark had stolen my choice. He had played God with my life, with my children's lives. Gripped the edge of the table to steady myself, bile rising in my throat. I thought the affair had broken me. But this was something far worse. This was unforgivable. Dr. Brooks cleared his throat. "Elena, there's more." I looked up, eyes burning, heart pounding. "The fertility clinic tampered with more than just your case. You're not the only one." I left, his office in a daze, the file clutched in my trembling hands. I had come here looking for answers. Instead, I had found something much bigger than a cheating husband. Mark hadn't just betrayed me. He had betrayed our children, our family, and dozens of other unsuspecting parents. And now I had the power to destroy him. I moved with quiet precision, the perfect, obedient wife playing her final act. I cooked dinner. I smiled at school drop-offs. I laughed politely at nosy neighbors who whispered about Mark's busy schedule and my bravery in keeping the family together. I let them think I was grieving. But behind closed doors, I was building a war machine. Mark had stolen my choices. Now, I would take everything from him. Late at night, when the house was silent, I moved carefully through my children's rooms. I ran trembling fingers through Emma's curls, pulling loose strands from her brush. I took a fresh toothbrush from the pack, replacing the one Ethan had used that morning. I clipped a single strand from Lucas's messy hair. The last piece was Mark's. His comb, still in the master bathroom, left untouched ever since he moved into the guest room. I sealed the samples in sterile bags, my heartbeat steady. Not a mother's. Hard anymore. Something colder, harder. The results came 2 weeks later. I read the email in silence, my breath slow, methodical. Probability of paternity, 0%. Mark Foster was not the father of my children. My hands didn't shake. I had known, but knowing and seeing it in black and white were two different things. Mark had built our family on a foundation of lies, but now I held the wrecking ball. Tell me how deep this goes. Veronica's forensic accountant, James Holloway, was a no-nonsense man with a sharp suit and sharper instincts. He scanned the bank statements, his expression grim. Horizon Holdings is a shell company, he said. Registered under Mark's name. The money moves from your joint savings into Horizon, then disappears into offshore accounts. How much? $250,000 over 2 years, he replied. But that's just the money we can trace. Hush money, bribes, a hidden empire of deceit. How do we make this hurt him the most? I asked. James smirked. We follow the trail to its final destination. Then we make sure he can't bury it. Her name was Diane Fletcher, and she had spent 12 years working inside Riverside's fertility clinic. I found her in a tiny apartment, her walls lined with filing cabinets no one had thought to take from her. I kept records, she said, her voice brittle with age and regret. I thought, maybe one day someone would listen. She placed a leather-bound journal in front of me. Inside, every falsified procedure, every substituted specimen, every signature of authorization, Mark's signature, including on my file. I traced the ink with my fingertips, rage simmering just beneath the surface. He never gave me a choice, I whispered. Diane's eyes softened. None of the women did, dear. She slid a business card across the table. Agent Michael Dawson, Federal Bureau of Investigation. He's been waiting for someone like you, she said. I pocketed the card. Then let's give him what he needs. The private investigators. Report arrived a week later. Sophia Haynes, Mark's mistress, his lover, his perfect young replacement, was not who she pretended to be. Her real name? Sophia Evelyn Haynes. Her mother, Evelyn Haynes, had been Mark's patient 5 years ago. A routine valve replacement gone wrong, one that ended in Evelyn's death. The official report? Evelyn had failed to disclose a medication that interfered with the procedure. The real story. Mark had been operating on minimal sleep after a weekend with Sophia in Chicago. A mistake was made. A cover-up was executed. A family was destroyed. Evelyn's husband died a year later. A broken heart, they said. That left Sophia alone to plot her way into Mark's life, alone to get close enough to destroy him. But now, she wasn't the only one holding the knife. The weight of what I had uncovered should have crushed me. Instead, it forged me into something else. Mark thought he had secured his future, that he had won the divorce before it had even started. He had no idea what was coming for him. I was no longer his wife. I was his reckoning. I smiled sweetly as I signed the mediation papers, my hand steady, my expression serene. Mark sat across from me, relaxed, his confidence palpable. He thought he had already won. He had no idea that the chessboard had shifted beneath him. I wasn't fighting the divorce. I wasn't making demands. I wasn't screaming or weeping or begging him to reconsider. No, that's what he expected. Instead, I agreed to his terms. You're being surprisingly reasonable, Elena, he mused, adjusting his gold cufflinks. I tilted, my head, a hint of sadness in my eyes. The perfect touch. The children come first, Mark. I just want what's best for everyone. He bought it. Every lie, every placid nod, every feigned moment of acceptance. He never saw the blade sliding between his ribs. Mark had grown careless, too accustomed to his superiority. He never thought I'd fight back. So when we had our quiet, civil co-parenting discussions, he spoke freely, casually dismissing my concerns about the children's future. "They're fine, Elena," he sighed one evening, sipping his whiskey. "I had them tested years ago. No signs of my heart condition. Nothing to worry about." I forced my pulse to stay steady. "You had them tested?" "Of course," he scoffed. "I'm their father. I made a medical decision." I watched him closely, memorizing the moment he doomed himself. Because every word, every single syllable was recorded. It was his voice, his confession, his own arrogance sealing his fate. I wasn't alone. 5 couples from the clinic, once so grateful for their miracle babies, now saw the truth. Their children's origins weren't what they believed. "We trusted them," Sarah Wilson murmured, tears in her eyes as she gripped the journal Diane had provided. "We trusted him." "We make this public," I told them, my voice calm but unyielding. "We make sure no one else ever trusts him again." They agreed. They were ready. The hospital board? They were about to be forced to listen. The Hudson Medical Center Gala was Mark's crowning moment, the peak of his glorified career. Physician of the Year. A standing ovation. Applause, admiration, respect. That's what he thought he was walking into. What he didn't know? The board had already seen the evidence. The DA had already been contacted, and Agent Dawson and his team were waiting in the wings, watching him toast to his unwavering ethics. That afternoon, Veronica's text flashed across my phone. "They're ready. He won't leave the gala a free man." I exhaled slowly, my hands tightening around the envelope in my lap. Inside? The DNA results that would strip him bare. Mark had spent 15 years crafting the perfect image. I had spent 3 months dismantling it. Tonight, his empire would burn. Mark stood on the grand stage of the Hudson Medical Center Gala, basking in the glow of thunderous applause. He was in his element, the celebrated surgeon, the man of integrity, the beacon of medical excellence. I stood at the back of the ballroom, dressed in sleek black, watching as he accepted the Physician of the Year award, his polished smile unwavering, his arrogance absolute. "Medicine isn't just science," he intoned into the microphone. "It's a sacred trust between doctor and patient. Ethics must guide every decision, every procedure, every moment in the operating room." The hospital board, now privy to his sins, sat rigid, their faces carved from stone. They knew. Agent Dawson, standing near the exit, knew. And in just a few short hours, the world would know too. Later that evening, Mark and Sophia dined at Luciano's, the very restaurant where he had once proposed to me. How fitting. How poetic. I arrived uninvited. The maitre d', ever polite, led me straight to their table. Mark's expression shifted from surprise to smug satisfaction. He thought I had come to beg. Sophia, dressed in crimson, the same shade as the lipstick stain that unraveled our marriage, watched me with wary amusement. I placed the cream-colored envelope on the white tablecloth, my smile unwavering. "Congratulations on your freedom," I murmured. "You might find this interesting reading." Mark's fingers trembled as he pulled out the document. He scanned the DNA test results, his confident smirk vanishing. Sophia leaned over, reading it, and her face drained of color. This isn't possible," he whispered. I leaned in, voice like steel wrapped in silk. "You ensured your sperm was never used in our IVF treatments. You falsified medical records. You built this family on a lie. And now, I'm taking it all back." At that moment, the restaurant doors burst open, the hospital board, Agent Dawson, federal officers. "Dr. Mark Foster." Dawson's voice rang out, sharp and unyielding. "You're under arrest for medical fraud, financial crimes, and ethical violations." Mark's face contorted in rage. "You set me up." I smiled, serene. No, Mark. You set yourself up. I just lit the match. As they hauled him away in handcuffs, the restaurant fell into stunned silence. Sophia, motionless, whispered, "You planned all of this." I met her gaze, feeling nothing but calm certainty. "I just finished what you started." Mark's license was revoked. The fertility clinic was shut down. Lawsuits piled up like a fortress of justice. His hidden accounts were frozen, his reputation obliterated. And me? I was free. No longer Mrs. Mark Foster. No longer the surgeon's devoted wife. For the first time. In 15 years, I was just Elena, and I had never felt stronger.